The galaxy had known peace for 3,000 years. Children were born, grew old, and died without ever hearing the sound of war. Planets traded freely with each other. Species that had once been enemies now shared meals and built cities together. It was a golden age, and everyone believed it would last forever. But peace built on lies is a fragile thing, and the greatest lie in galactic history was about to break apart. High Counselor of the stood at the window of his office on the capital world of Prime. He was old, even by the long-lived standards of his species. His gray skin had grown thin, and his 4 eyes were clouded with age. But his mind was still sharp, and right now, that mind was filled with a fear he had not felt in centuries. In his hand he held a data tablet. The message on it was short, only 5 words, but those 5 words had the power to destroy everything. The barrier has gone dark. Closed his eyes and remembered. He remembered the war. He remembered the fear. He remembered the enemy that had almost ended everything. He remembered the humans. 3,000 years ago, the galaxy had been different. The Galactic Concordat was an alliance of 12 elder species. They had ruled the stars for millions of years. They had seen countless younger races rise and fall. They had faced threats from every corner of the universe, and they had always won. Then they found Earth. It was a small planet, orbiting an ordinary yellow star in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. The species that lived there called themselves humans. They were primitive. They had only just begun to explore their own solar system. Their technology was crude. Their weapons were laughable. They should have been easy to control. The Concordat sent a diplomatic fleet to make first contact. The plan was simple. They would offer the humans a place in the galactic order. The humans would accept. They always did. Every species the Concordat had ever encountered had eventually bowed to the wisdom of the elder races. The humans did not bow. Still did not understand what went wrong. The historical records were incomplete. Much had been destroyed or hidden in the years since, but he knew the basic facts. The diplomatic mission had failed. There had been some kind of incident. Shots were fired. People died. And then the humans attacked. It should have been suicide. A single primitive species against the combined might of 12 star-spanning civilizations. The war should have lasted days, weeks at most. The Concordat had thousands of warships. They had weapons that could crack planets. They had technology that the humans could not even understand. But the humans did not fight like any enemy the Concordat had ever faced. They did not surrender when they were outnumbered. They did not retreat when they were. They did not negotiate when they were losing. Instead, they fought harder. They adapted. They learned. In the first year of the war, the Concordat destroyed Earth's space fleet 3 times. Each time, the humans built a new one. Each time, the new fleet was better than the last. The humans studied the Concordat's weapons and found ways to defend against them. They studied the Concordat's ships and found their weaknesses. They took apart every piece of captured technology and figured out how to make it their own. By the end of the first year, human ships could match Concordat ships in combat. By the end of the second year, they were winning. Remembered the reports from the front lines. He remembered the disbelief in the voices of the commanders. He remembered the fear. They learn too fast, Admiral had said. We use a weapon once and they have a counter for it within weeks. We develop a new tactic and they adapt to it within days. It is like fighting our own reflection, except the reflection is always one step ahead. But it was not just the humans' ability to adapt that terrified the galaxy. It was the way they fought. The other species of the galaxy had evolved past raw aggression. War for them was a matter of calculation. You fought when the numbers favored you. You retreated when they did not. You surrendered when defeat was certain. It was logical. It was efficient. It was civilized. The humans did not understand this, or perhaps they understood it and simply did not care. They fought with a fury that the galaxy had never seen. They charged into battles they could not win. They sacrificed themselves to take down enemy ships. They kept fighting even when their bodies were broken and their weapons were empty. They treated death as an inconvenience rather than an ending. Remembered a recording from the Battle of Station. A human pilot, her ship crippled and burning, had aimed her vessel at a Concordat carrier. She had been offered the chance to surrender. Her response had been broadcast on an open channel for everyone to hear. "You started this," she had said. "We're going to finish it." Then she had accelerated into the carrier's engine core. The explosion destroyed both ships and damaged 3 others nearby. This was not an isolated incident. It was a pattern. The humans seemed to believe that defeat was impossible, or perhaps they simply did not care about defeat. They only cared about making the enemy pay. The war lasted 40 years. It cost the Concordat more ships than the previous 10,000 years combined. Entire fleets were destroyed. Planets were lost. Species that had never known fear learned to dread the sight of human vessels. And still the humans kept coming. By the end, the Concordat was desperate. Their resources were running low. Their populations were tired of war. Some species were talking about negotiating a peace. Others were talking about simply giving the humans what they wanted and hoping they would stop. But the leaders of the Concordat knew that would not work. The humans did not want territory. They did not want resources. They did not want power. They wanted something far more dangerous. They wanted revenge. The incident that had started the war had killed thousands of humans, civilians, families, children. The humans had not forgotten. They would never forget. And they would not stop until every species that had been involved in that incident had paid the price. So the Concordat made a different choice. They could not defeat the humans. They could not negotiate with them. They could not reason with them. But perhaps they could contain them. It took 10 years of secret research. The minds from all 12 species worked together on the project. They called it the Veil. It was a quantum barrier, a wall of twisted space-time that would surround the entire Sol system. Nothing could pass through it. Nothing could break it. Not from the outside. And not from the inside. The barrier was activated on what the humans called July 4th, 2347. Always thought there was a bitter irony in that date. The humans had once celebrated that day as a symbol of freedom. Now it would mark the beginning of their prison. The Concordat did not tell anyone what they had done. The official story was that the humans had been defeated. Their planet had been destroyed. Their species was extinct. The war was over. The records were erased. The star charts were altered. The entire sector of space where Sol system existed was simply removed from every database in the galaxy. Within a generation, the humans became a myth. Within a century, they were forgotten entirely. Only the highest leaders of the Concordat knew the truth, and they passed that truth down to their successors in whispered conversations in locked rooms. The humans were still there, trapped behind the veil, still alive, still watching, still waiting. For 3,000 years, the galaxy lived in peace. New generations were born who knew nothing of the war. The 12 species of the Concordat grew and prospered. They explored new worlds. They developed new technologies. They believed they had entered an eternal golden age. No one asked what the humans were doing behind the barrier. The monitoring stations were still there, of course, hidden at the edge of the veil, invisible to everyone except those who knew where to look. They watched Sol's system constantly, recording everything that happened inside. But no one ever checked the recordings. No one wanted to. Because the few times someone did check, the readings made no sense. Energy signatures that dwarfed stars, structures being built in dimensions that should not exist, signals that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Whatever the humans were doing inside their prison, it was beyond anything the galaxy could understand. The leaders of the Concordat told themselves it did not matter. The veil was impenetrable. The humans could build whatever they wanted inside their cage. They would never get out. Had believed that once. He had spent his entire career believing it. He had repeated it to himself every night before he slept, like a prayer, like a promise. Now he stood at his window, holding a data tablet with 5 words on it, and he knew that everything he had believed was a lie. The barrier had gone dark, the veil had fallen, and the humans were free. He did not know how it had happened. The veil was supposed to be indestructible. It was supposed to last forever. It was supposed to keep the humans contained until the stars burned out. But the monitoring stations had stopped receiving data. One by one, they had gone silent. And then, just before the last one went dark, it had sent a single image. Looked at the image on his tablet. It showed the edge of the veil, the place where normal space met the twisted barrier, except the barrier was not there anymore. There was only empty space. And in that empty space, there was a ship. It was not like any ship had ever seen. It was not like anything the galaxy had ever built. It was huge, larger than a moon, and it was made of something that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Strange lights played across its surface, and it moved through space with a grace that should have been impossible for something so massive. On the front of the ship, there was a symbol. It took a long moment to recognize it. It was an old symbol, one that had been erased from galactic records 3,000 years ago. It was the flag of Earth. Set down the tablet and looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the humans were coming. After 3,000 years, they were finally free, and he had no idea what they wanted. Revenge? Perhaps. The humans had never forgotten a wrong. They had never forgiven an enemy. They had spent 40 years trying to destroy the Concordat for a single incident. What would they do after 3,000 years of imprisonment? But there was something else in the image that bothered him, something that made his fear even greater. The ship was not heading toward any Concordat world. It was not on an attack vector. It was simply sitting there at the edge of where the barrier had been, as if it was waiting for something. And on the hull of the ship, just below the Earth flag, there was another symbol. It was newer, something had never seen before. It took him a moment to understand what it was. A smile, a simple human smile, rendered in lights that could be seen from 1,000 miles away. Felt a chill run down his spine. He had studied the old records. He knew what humans looked like when they were angry. He knew what they looked like when they were afraid. He knew what they looked like when they were ready for war. But he had never seen them smile. And somehow, that smile was more terrifying than any weapon he could imagine. The door to his office opened. His assistant, a young named, rushed in with a look of panic on her face. "High Counselor," she said, her voice trembling. "We are receiving reports from all over the galaxy. Ships are appearing, everywhere. Thousands of them, tens of thousands, they are just appearing out of nowhere." Nodded slowly. He had expected this. The humans had always been good at surprises. "Are they attacking?" Shook her head. "No, sir, they are just sitting there in orbit around every major world, every station, every colony. They are not doing anything. They are not even responding to communications." "They are waiting," said quietly. Waiting for what? Did not answer, he did not know, and that was what frightened him most. He turned away from the window and walked to his desk. He needed to call an emergency session of the council. He needed to mobilize the fleets. He needed to prepare for war. But even as he reached for his communication device, a part of him knew it was pointless. The humans had spent 3,000 years preparing for this moment. The Concordat had spent 3,000 years pretending it would never come. They were not ready. They could never be ready. And somewhere out there, the humans were smiling. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was chaos. Representatives from all 12 species shouted at each other, trying to be heard over the noise. Fear filled the air like a poison. "We must attack now," Admiral of the demanded, before they have a chance to organize. Attack with what? Chancellor of the replied. Our fleets are scattered across the galaxy. By the time we gather them, the humans will have fortified every position. Then we negotiate, suggested Elder of the. We offer them whatever they want, territory, resources, reparations for the war. You fool, spat. You cannot negotiate with humans. They do not understand negotiation. They only understand victory and defeat. Then we are already defeated, said quietly. Look at the reports. Their ships are everywhere. They appeared out of nowhere all at the same time. They have technology we cannot even comprehend. If they wanted to destroy us, we would already be dead. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew she was right. Stood at the head of the chamber watching the chaos unfold. He had said nothing so far. He was too tired, too afraid, too old. But now he raised his hand, and slowly the noise died down. We do not know what the humans want, he said. We do not know why they are here, but we know one thing. 3,000 years ago we had a choice. We could have tried to make peace with them. We could have tried to understand them. Instead, we locked them away and tried to forget they existed. He paused and looked around the chamber at the frightened faces of the galactic leaders. That was a mistake, he continued. Perhaps the greatest mistake in the history of our civilization, and now we must face the consequences of that mistake. We cannot run. We cannot hide. We can only wait and see what the humans have become. He looked up at the ceiling, as if he could see through it to the stars beyond. And pray that whatever they have become, they are willing to forgive. The chamber was silent. No one had anything to say, because they all knew deep in their hearts that forgiveness was not something humans were known for. Outside in the darkness between the stars, the human ships waited, patient, silent, smiling. After 3,000 years, the long wait was finally over, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Ambassador of the had always asked too many questions. It was a trait that had served her well in her career as a diplomat. It was also a trait that had nearly gotten her killed more than once. She was not like other. Her people were known for their calm acceptance of the way things were. They did not question the old stories. They did not dig into the past. They believed that history was settled, that the universe had no more secrets to reveal. Did not believe that. She had never believed it. Even as a child, she had looked at the stars and wondered what secrets they were hiding. Now, standing in a hidden archive deep beneath the surface of Prime, she finally had her answer, and it was worse than anything she could have imagined. She had found the archive by accident, or perhaps it was not an accident at all. Perhaps something had wanted her to find it. She had been researching the old wars, the ones that had happened before the current era of peace. She had found inconsistencies in the records, missing files, gaps in the timeline, star charts that did not match the actual positions of the stars. Most historians would have ignored these inconsistencies. They would have assumed they were errors, glitches in ancient systems that no one had bothered to fix. But was not most historians. She had dug deeper. She had asked questions that no one wanted to answer. She had used her position as ambassador to access files that were supposed to be sealed forever. And she had found the truth about humanity. The archive was vast. It contained millions of records, videos, reports, and analyses. It contained everything the Concordat had tried to erase. The first contact with Earth, the incident that started the war, the 40 years of conflict that followed, and finally, the veil. Sat in the darkness of the archive, surrounded by screens showing images of a species she had been taught never existed. She watched videos of human soldiers charging into impossible battles. She read reports from commanders who could not believe what they were seeing. She studied the plans for the veil, the quantum barrier that had trapped an entire species in their own solar system. And she felt sick. They had lied. For 3,000 years, the leaders of the galaxy had lied to everyone. They had told the children that humanity was a myth. They had told the historians that the war had never happened. They had erased an entire species from existence, not because they had defeated them, but because they were afraid of them. Because they could not defeat them. Understood now why the humans had been so terrifying. It was not just their aggression, although that was frightening enough. It was not just their adaptability, although that was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was something deeper, something fundamental. The humans did not know how to give up. Other species, when faced with overwhelming odds, would retreat. They would surrender. They would negotiate. They would accept defeat and move on. It was the rational thing to do. It was the civilized thing to do. But humans were not rational. They were not civilized. They were something else entirely. The records showed battles where human forces had been outnumbered 10-1. Instead of retreating, they had attacked. The records showed human ships, crippled and burning, ramming into enemy vessels because their guns no longer worked. The records showed human soldiers fighting hand-to-hand in the corridors of captured stations, long after any sane person would have surrendered. And the records showed something else, something that makes blood run cold. The humans had been winning. Not at first. In the beginning, the war had gone exactly as the Concordat had expected. The humans were primitive. Their technology was crude. Their numbers were small. The elder races had crushed them again and again. But each time the humans came back stronger. They learned from every defeat. They adapted to every weapon. They improved with every battle. By the end of the war, they were not just matching the Concordat. They were surpassing them. That was why the Concordat had built the Veil, not because they had won, but because they were about to lose. Leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. 3,000 years. For 3,000 years, an entire species had been trapped in a prison of twisted space-time. What had they done in all that time? What had they become? She had to know. It took her weeks to find the monitoring stations. They were hidden well, tucked away in corners of the archive that most people did not even know existed, but was persistent. She had always been persistent. The stations were ancient. They had been built at the same time as the Veil, designed to watch the humans from a safe distance. They recorded everything that happened inside the barrier, every ship, every signal, every movement. No one had checked the recordings in centuries. Why would they? The humans were contained. The humans were forgotten. The humans were not a threat anymore. Activated the first recording and watched. At first she saw what she expected. The Sol system, trapped behind its invisible wall. Earth, the blue-green world where humanity had been born. The other planets, the moons, the asteroids that humans had begun to colonize before the war. But as she watched, things began to change. In the first century after the Veil went up, the humans had tried to break through. They had thrown everything they had at the barrier, ships, weapons, bombs that could crack moons. Nothing worked. The Veil held. Eventually they stopped trying. But they did not stop working. Watched in amazement as the humans began to transform their prison. They built structures in space, massive stations that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever constructed. They hollowed out asteroids and turned them into factories. They covered the moons of Jupiter with solar collectors that gathered energy from the distant sun. And then they began to build things that could not understand. By the 5th century, the monitoring stations were detecting energy signatures that should have been impossible, power levels that exceeded the output of stars, gravitational anomalies that suggested the humans were bending space itself, signals that seemed to come from dimensions that should not exist. By the 10th century, the humans were no longer limited to three-dimensional space. The recordings showed structures that existed in 4 dimensions, 5 dimensions, dimensions that had no number. The humans had learned to fold reality like paper, to step sideways into places that the laws of physics said could not be real. By the 20th century, the humans had become something else entirely. watched the most recent recordings with a mixture of awe and terror. The Sol system was no longer recognizable. It was filled with structures that hurt her eyes to look at, ships that moved without engines, stations that existed in multiple places at once, and at the center of it all, where Earth had once orbited quietly around its yellow sun, there was something new. It was a sphere, perfectly smooth and perfectly black. It was larger than Earth had been, larger than Jupiter. It absorbed all light that touched it and gave nothing back. The monitoring stations could not analyze it. They could not even measure it. It was simply there, a hole in reality, a door to somewhere else. Did not know what it was, but she knew one thing for certain. The humans were no longer trapped. They could leave any time they wanted. The veil was nothing to them now. A barrier built with the technology of 3,000 years ago was like a paper wall to a species that had learned to fold spacetime itself. So why were they still inside? Found her answer in the final recording. It showed the black sphere at the center of Sol system. The monitoring station had somehow managed to capture a signal coming from inside. A voice. A human voice. "They are watching," the voice said. "They have been watching for 3,000 years. They built a prison for monsters and forgot that monsters can grow." There was a pause, and then the voice continued. "But we are not monsters anymore. We were once. We let our anger drive us. We let our hate consume us, and they locked us away because of it." Another pause, longer this time. "They gave us a gift and they did not even know it. They gave us time, time to think, time to grow, time to become what we were always meant to be, and now we are ready." The recording crackled with static. The monitoring station was struggling to maintain the connection. "We could leave any time we want," the voice said. "We could tear down their barrier like it was made of paper. We could destroy every world they have built, every station, every ship. We have the power now, more power than they can imagine." The voice paused one final time. "But we will not, because we have learned something in our long imprisonment. Revenge is a finite fuel. It burns hot, but it burns out. We have burned through our revenge. We have burned through our hate, and now we are left with something else. Curiosity. We want to see what happens next. We want to see what the galaxy has become. We want to meet the children of our enemies and see if they are different from their parents. So we will wait, we will watch, and when the time is right, we will open the door and walk through. And we will be smiling." The recording ended. Sat in the darkness, her heart pounding. She understood now. She understood everything. The humans were not prisoners anymore. They had not been prisoners for a very long time. They were guests who had decided to stay. Visitors who were waiting for the right moment to introduce themselves. And the galaxy had no idea. Knew she had to warn someone. She had to tell the council what she had found. She had to make them understand that everything they believed was a lie. But even as she rose from her chair, she knew it was probably too late. She left the archive and made her way to the surface. The capital city of Prime stretched out before her, beautiful and peaceful in the light of the setting sun. Ships moved lazily through the sky. People walked through the streets, going about their daily lives, unaware that their entire civilization was built on a lie. Took a deep breath and started walking toward the council chambers. She did not know if they would believe her. She did not know if they would even listen, but she had to try. She had made it halfway across the plaza when the sky changed. It started as a flicker, like a light being turned on and off very quickly. Then the flicker became a shimmer, and the shimmer became a glow, and suddenly the entire sky was filled with light. Stopped and looked up. All around her, people were doing the same thing. They pointed and shouted and gasped in amazement. Ships were appearing in the sky. Thousands of them, tens of thousands. They materialized out of nothing as if they were stepping through invisible doors in the air. They were massive, larger than any ships had ever seen, and they were beautiful in a strange and terrible way. They moved with a grace that physics, They glowed with lights that seemed to come from another dimension. And on every ship there was the same symbol, a simple image that recognized from the archives. The flag of Earth. The humans had arrived, stood in the plaza, surrounded by screaming, panicking crowds, and watched as the human ships filled the sky. She waited for the attack to begin. She waited for the weapons to fire. She waited for the end of everything she had ever known. But the attack did not come. The ships just hung there, silent and still, like an audience waiting for a performance to begin. Their lights flickered in patterns that might have been language. Their shapes shifted and flowed in ways that hurt the eyes to watch. And somewhere deep inside her mind heard a voice. Not a sound, not words, just a feeling, a presence, a gentle touch of something vast and ancient and impossibly patient. "Hello," the voice said. "We have been waiting to meet you. We come in peace. And we would like to talk." Stood there for a long time, looking up at the sky full of impossible ships. Fear and wonder and hope and terror all mixed together in her heart. The humans had returned. After 3,000 years of silence, they had finally opened the door and walked through. And just as the recording had promised, they were smiling. She did not know what would happen next. She did not know if this was the beginning of a new golden age or the end of everything. But she knew one thing for certain. The galaxy would never be the same again. Around her, the chaos continued. People ran and screamed and prayed to gods they had forgotten. The military scrambled to mobilize forces that could never match what had appeared in their sky. The council debated and argued and accomplished nothing. But did not run, she did not scream, she did not pray. She just stood there, looking up at the human ships, and waited to see what would happen next. Because she had spent her whole life asking questions, and now, finally, she was going to get some answers. The galaxy had expected fire. It had expected destruction. It had expected revenge. Instead, it got silence. 3 days had passed since the human ships appeared. 3 days of waiting. 3 days of fear. 3 days of nothing. The ships hung in orbit around every major world in the Concordat. They did not move. They did not attack. They did not respond to any communication. They simply floated there, vast and silent and impossibly patient, like predators waiting for their prey to make the first move. Admiral of the stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Vengeance, and stared at the tactical display. The human ships were everywhere. His sensors showed thousands of them around Prime alone, millions more scattered throughout the galaxy. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in the history of civilization. And it was doing nothing. "This is wrong," muttered. He had been saying that for 3 days. No one listened anymore. "This is a trick. It has to be a trick." His second in command, a young officer named, stood beside him with a worried expression. "Sir, perhaps we should wait for orders from the council." "The council," spat. "The council is useless. They have been debating for 3 days and accomplished nothing. While they talk, the humans grow stronger. While they argue, our people lose hope." He turned to face his crew. They were afraid. He could see it in their eyes. They had all heard the stories about humans. The old legends that parents told their children to make them behave. The myths about monsters that never surrendered, never retreated, never stopped fighting until every enemy was dead. And now those monsters were real. They were here, and they were waiting. "We cannot wait any longer," said. "If we show weakness, they will destroy us. We must strike first. We must show them that the Concordat is not afraid." Looked even more worried. "Sir, with respect, the council has ordered us to stand down. They believe the humans want to negotiate." "Negotiate?" laughed bitterly. "You cannot negotiate with humans. The old records are clear on that. They do not understand negotiation. They only understand strength." He turned back to the tactical display. The nearest human ship was only a few thousand kilometers away. It was massive, 10 times the size of his own flagship. Strange lights played across its surface. It looked like it was made of liquid metal that constantly shifted and flowed. "Lock weapons on that ship," ordered. The bridge went silent. Everyone stared at him. "Sir," his voice was barely a whisper. "You heard me. Lock weapons. Prepare to fire on my command." "But sir, the Council—" "The Council can debate while our civilization burns," snapped. "I will not. History will remember that they were the ones who stood against the human threat. History will remember that we had the courage to fight when everyone else was too afraid." Slowly, reluctantly, his crew obeyed. The weapons systems powered up. The targeting computers locked onto the human ship. The bridge filled with the hum of energy building toward release. Took a deep breath. This was it. This was the moment that would define his legacy. He would either be remembered as the hero who saved the galaxy or the fool who started its destruction. Either way, he would not be remembered as a coward. "Fire," he said. The eternal vengeance unleashed everything it had. Plasma cannons, missile batteries, energy beams that could cut through planetary shields. The combined firepower of the most advanced warship in the fleet, all concentrated on a single target. The weapons reached the human ship and stopped. Stared at the display in disbelief. His weapons had simply stopped. The missiles hung motionless in space. The energy beams dissipated into nothing. The plasma bolts faded and disappeared. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Why are our weapons not hitting?" Before anyone could answer, the lights on the bridge flickered. Consoles went dark. Alarms started blaring, then cut off abruptly. The hum of the ship's engines faded into silence. The eternal vengeance was dead. Stood in the darkness, his heart pounding. Emergency lights flickered on, casting red shadows across the faces of his terrified crew. "Report," he shouted. "What happened?" Was frantically checking his console. "Sir, all systems are offline. Weapons, engines, life support, everything. We are completely dead in space." "That is impossible. Our systems are shielded against." The main crackled to life, but instead of showing the tactical display, it showed a face. A human face. Had never seen a human before. The old records had been destroyed and only a few images remained in the most secret archives, but he recognized the face immediately. It was exactly what the legends had described. Soft features, 2 eyes, strange flat teeth, skin that could be any number of colors. This human had dark skin and gray hair. Its eyes were calm and steady, and it was smiling. "Admiral," the human said. Its voice was pleasant, warm, almost friendly. "My name is Ambassador David. I apologize for disabling your ship. We did not want you to hurt yourself." Sphere turned to rage. "How dare you? You have committed an act of war." "With respect, Admiral, you fired first. We merely defended ourselves." The human's smile did not waver. "But we do not hold it against you. We understand that you are afraid. We would be afraid too in your position." "We are not afraid of you." "Of course not." The human nodded as if agreeing with him. "You are a proud species with a proud history. You have faced many enemies and defeated them all. It is natural that you would want to face us the same way." The human leaned forward slightly, and something in its expression changed. The smile was still there, but behind it saw something else. Something ancient and patient and impossibly deep. "But we are not like your other enemies, Admiral. We are not here to conquer you. We are not here to destroy you. We are not even here to punish you for what your ancestors did to us." "Then why are you here?" The human's smile widened. "Because we want to meet you. We have been alone for 3,000 years. We have had no one to talk to except ourselves. We have learned everything we can learn in isolation. Now we want to learn something new. We want to learn about you." Did not know what to say. This was not how enemies were supposed to behave. This was not how war was supposed to work. The humans should be attacking. They should be demanding surrender. They should be doing something that made sense. but they were just smiling and talking about wanting to learn. Our ship finally managed to say, "You will restore our systems." "Of course," the human said, "as soon as you agree to stand down and allow us to send a diplomatic delegation to your government. We have much to discuss." "And if we refuse?" The human's expression became thoughtful. "Then we will wait. We are very patient, Admiral. We have been waiting for 3,000 years. We can wait a little longer." "But I hope you will not refuse. I hope you will give us a chance to show you that we have changed. We are not the monsters your ancestors feared. We are something different now, something better." The human paused, and its smile became gentle. "We are not your enemies, Admiral. We do not want to fight you. We want to help you. We have learned so much in our long imprisonment. We have cured diseases that once killed millions. We have developed technologies that can end hunger and poverty. We have found answers to questions that your scientists have been asking for thousands of years. We want to share all of this with you. We want to help you become something greater than you have ever been. All we ask in return is one simple thing." "Swallowed what?" "Forgiveness," the human said. "Not for what your ancestors did to us. We have already forgiven that. We forgave it long ago. No, we ask forgiveness for what we were, for the violence, for the rage, for the terror we caused. We were wrong. We let our anger control us. We became the monsters your ancestors believed us to be, and for that we are sorry." Stood in the darkness of his crippled ship and stared at the human face on the screen. He had expected many things from this encounter: threats, demands, violence, death. He had not expected an apology. The silence stretched on for a long moment. Finally spoke. I will speak to the council. I will tell them what you have said." The human's smile brightened. "Thank you, Admiral. That is all we ask." The screen went dark. A moment later, the lights on the bridge flickered back on. Consoles hummed to life. The familiar vibration of the engines returned. The eternal vengeance was whole again. Turned to with wide eyes. "Sir, what just happened?" Did not answer. He was still staring at the blank, thinking about what the human had said, about forgiveness, about change, about becoming something better. He had been prepared to die fighting the humans. He had been prepared to sacrifice his ship and his crew to protect the galaxy from monsters. But the humans were not monsters. Or if they were monsters who had learned to be something else. And that, realized, was far more terrifying than anything he had imagined. Because monsters you could fight, monsters you could understand, but a species that had the power to destroy you and chose not to. A species that could have had revenge and chose forgiveness instead. That was something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. Did not know how to fight that. He did not know if anyone did. The news of the encounter spread quickly. Within hours, everyone in the galaxy knew what had happened to Admiral. The story was told and retold, growing with each telling. They had attacked the humans. The humans had disabled their ship without firing a single shot. The humans had apologized. The humans had asked for forgiveness. Some people did not believe it. They said it was a trick. They said the humans were lying, trying to catch the galaxy off guard before they attacked. They pointed to the old records, to the stories of human violence and human rage, and said that species do not change. Not really. Not ever. But others looked at the human ships hanging peacefully in their skis, and they wondered. Ambassador of the was one of the ones who wondered. She had been following the situation closely since the humans arrived. She had watched the chaos in the council chambers. She had seen the fleets mobilize and then stand down. She had heard the reports of human ships appearing around every world, silent and patient and waiting. And she had remembered what she had found in the archive. The recording of the human voice talking about curiosity, about wanting to see what the galaxy had become, about wanting to meet the children of their enemies. Maybe, she thought, maybe the humans were telling the truth. Maybe they really had changed. Or maybe they were just better at lying than anyone had ever imagined. Either way, knew that someone had to find out. Someone had to meet with the humans face to face. Someone had to look into their eyes and try to understand what they really wanted. And somehow, she knew that someone was going to be her. She was not surprised when the summons came. The council had finally made a decision. They were going to send a diplomatic delegation to meet with the humans, and they wanted to lead it. She was the obvious choice. She was the one who had found the archive. She was the one who knew the truth about the war and the veil. She was the one who understood, better than anyone, what the humans had been and what they might have become. She was also, she suspected, the one the council considered most expendable. If the humans turned out to be lying, if this was all a trap, would be the first to die. And the council could pretend they had never authorized the mission. Did not care. She had spent her entire life searching for truth. Now the greatest truth in galactic history was waiting for her, just a few thousand kilometers away. She was not going to let fear stop her from finding it. The shuttle launched from Prime on the morning of the fourth day. It was small, just and two assistants. The humans had requested a minimal delegation. They had said they did not want anyone to feel threatened. As the shuttle rose through the atmosphere, looked out the window at the human ships filling the sky. They were beautiful in their strange alien way. They gleamed in the sunlight like sculptures made of light and shadow. They moved with a grace that seemed impossible for objects so large. And somewhere on one of those ships, humans were waiting for her. The descendants of the species that had terrorized the galaxy 3,000 years ago. The children of monsters. Or perhaps the children of something new. Took a deep breath and watched the stars grow brighter as the shuttle left the atmosphere behind. She was about to find out which one it was. And whatever she found, whatever the truth turned out to be, she knew one thing for certain. The galaxy was watching, the galaxy was waiting, and the future of everything depended on what happened next. No pressure, she thought to herself. And despite everything, she almost smiled. The human ship was larger than had expected. From a distance, it had seemed big. Up close, it was overwhelming. The shuttle approached what looked like a tiny gap in the ship's hull. That gap turned out to be a landing bay large enough to hold a dozen Concordat cruisers. By the ancestors, one of his assistants whispered. How did they build something like this? Did not answer. She was too busy staring at the interior of the bay. It was not like any ship she had ever seen. There were no hard edges, no visible seams, no sign of the usual machinery that kept a ship running. The walls seemed to flow and shift like living tissue. Soft light came from everywhere and nowhere. The air smelled clean and fresh, like a forest after rain. The shuttle set down gently on a floor that rippled slightly at the contact, then took a deep breath and stood up. Stay here, she told her assistants. I will make first contact alone. They looked relieved. Did not blame them. She was terrified too. But she had been terrified before, and she had learned that fear was not a good enough reason to stop. The shuttle door opened, stepped out into the vast, strange space of the human ship. A figure was waiting for her. The human was tall, taller than had expected from the old records. It was female with dark skin and eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 years of wisdom. She was wearing simple clothes, plain and comfortable. No armor, no weapons, nothing that suggested threat. But could feel something around her, something in the air, something that pressed gently against her mind. Power, more power than she had ever sensed in her life. It was like standing next to a sun that had chosen to be gentle. Ambassador, the human said. Her voice was warm and welcoming. Thank you for coming. My name is Sarah. I have been chosen to speak for humanity. Tried to control her trembling. You know my name. Sarah smiled. It was a kind smile, a patient smile, the same smile that had seen on the ships, rendered in lights 1,000 miles wide. We know many things, Ambassador. We have been watching for a very long time, Please do not be afraid. You are safe here. You will always be safe with us." She gestured toward a doorway that had not been there a moment ago. "Come, we have much to discuss." Followed her through corridors that seemed to change as they walked. The walls shifted colors. The floor adjusted to her steps. Once, she could have sworn she saw stars through the ceiling, even though they were deep inside the ship. "This place," she said, "how is it possible?" "It is possible because we learned to make it possible," Sarah replied. 3,000 years is a long time, Ambassador. Long enough to change many things. Long enough to change everything. They entered a room that looked like a garden. Trees grew from floors that were not soil. Water flowed upward in streams that gravity. Strange flowers bloomed in colors that had no names for. In the center of the garden there was a table, 2 chairs, nothing else. Sarah sat down in one chair and gestured for to take the other. "Please, sit, we will talk." Sat, her heart was pounding so hard she was sure Sarah could hear it. She clasped her hands in her lap to stop them from shaking. "I have questions," she said. "I know, you have always had questions. That is why we wanted to meet you." Sarah's smile widened slightly. "You are the one who found the archive. You are the one who learned the truth about the war. You are the one who understood that the stories were lies." "How do you know that?" "We watch, we listen. We have been doing it for a very long time." Sarah's expression became thoughtful. "We know everything about the galaxy, Ambassador. We know every secret the Concordat has tried to hide. We know every lie they have told. We know the names of every species that voted to lock us away." Felt a chill run down her spine. "And you do not want revenge?" "Once we wanted nothing else." Sarah looked down at her hands. They were ordinary hands, soft, gentle, not the hands of a monster. "The first century after the veil went up we spent trying to break through. We threw everything we had at that barrier. We would have destroyed anyone who stood in our way." "What changed?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. "We failed. The barrier could not be broken. Not with any technology we had, not with any weapon we could build. For the first time in human history, we faced something we could not overcome through force. So we stopped trying." She looked up and her eyes met. There was something ancient in those eyes, something that had seen more than any mortal being should ever see. "We had a choice, Ambassador. We could spend eternity beating ourselves against an unbreakable wall, or we could turn around and look at what we had. What we had was ourselves, our minds, our creativity, our endless, stubborn refusal to accept that anything was impossible. So we stopped trying to break out, and we started trying to grow." Sarah rose from her chair and walked to the edge of the garden. She touched a flower, and it bloomed brighter at her touch. "The first few centuries were hard. We had to unlearn everything we thought we knew. We had to let go of our anger, our hatred, our need for revenge. Those things had defined us for so long. Without them, we did not know who we were. But slowly we found out. We discovered that there was more to being human than fighting, more than winning, more than making our enemies suffer." She turned back to face. "We learned to create instead of destroy. We learned to understand instead of fear. We learned to love instead of hate. And we grew. We grew beyond what we had ever imagined. We mapped the human mind and learned to expand it. We conquered diseases that had plagued us since the beginning of our species. We developed technologies that would have seemed like magic to our ancestors. And eventually, we learned to step outside of normal space entirely, to exist in dimensions that your scientists do not even know about, to become something that is still human, but also something more." Listened in silence. She did not know what to say. The things Sarah was describing were beyond anything she had ever imagined. "You could have left at any time," she finally said. "For thousands of years you could have walked right through the veil. Why did you stay?" Sarah smiled that gentle, patient smile. "Because we were not ready. because you were not ready, because we knew that if we came back too soon, we would fall into old patterns. We would become the monsters you remembered. So we waited. We watched the galaxy through your own monitoring stations. We saw your civilization grow and flourish. We saw your children born, your empires rise and fall, your science advance. We watched you become something better than your ancestors. And when we finally felt ready, when we finally felt that we had grown enough, we came back. Shook her head slowly. I do not understand. You could destroy us. You could conquer the galaxy with a thought. Why would you choose peace instead? Sarah walked back to the table and sat down. She looked at with an expression of infinite kindness. Let me tell you a story, Ambassador. 3,000 years ago, humanity was a young species. We were aggressive. We were territorial. We were afraid of everything different from ourselves. When your ancestors came to our world, we saw enemies. We saw a threat. We reacted the way young, frightened species always react. With violence. The war that followed was our fault as much as yours. We could have negotiated. We could have tried to understand. Instead, we let our fear become rage. We became the very monsters you believed us to be. And your ancestors punished us for it. They locked us away. They tried to forget we existed. Sarah paused and something flickered in her eyes. Pain, perhaps, or regret. They were wrong to do that, but we were wrong first. We gave them no choice. Our aggression, our refusal to surrender, our absolute commitment to destroying anyone who threatened us, we made them afraid. So afraid that they felt they had no option except to imprison us. We cannot blame them for that, not anymore. We understand now why they did what they did. She reached across the table and, very gently, took his hand. We are sorry, Ambassador, not for what was done to us, for what we did to deserve it. Stared at the human woman. 3,000 years of fear, 3,000 years of lies, 3,000 years of waiting for monsters to return. And the monsters had returned, but they were not monsters anymore. Why are you telling me this? Asked. Why me? Sarah smiled. Because you are the one who asked questions. You are the one who looked for truth when everyone else was content with lies. You are the one who will help the galaxy understand what we have become. We need someone to speak for us. Someone your people will trust. Someone who can look at us and see past the old stories, the old fears, the old hatreds. We need you. The weight of those words settled over like a heavy cloak. She understood what Sarah was asking. She understood what it would mean. You want me to tell them, she said. You want me to tell the galaxy that humanity has changed, that you are not the enemy anymore. Yes. And if they do not believe me? Sarah's expression became sad. Then we will wait. We will prove ourselves through our actions. We will help those who accept our help, and we will leave in peace those who do not. Eventually, the galaxy will understand. But it would be faster if they believed you, easier, less painful for everyone. Looked down at her hand, still clasped in Sarah's. The human's touch was warm, comforting, nothing like what she had expected from a monster. I do not know if I can do this, she admitted. I am just a diplomat, I am not a hero. You found the truth when no one else was looking, Sarah said softly. You came here when everyone else was afraid. You are more of a hero than you know. She released his hand and stood up. Come, let me show you something. They walked through more corridors, through more impossible spaces, saw things she could not explain, rooms that existed in multiple places at once, gardens that grew plants from 100 different worlds, libraries that contained the knowledge of 1,000 civilizations. And finally, they came to a window. Through it saw stars, millions of stars, billions. The entire galaxy spread out before her like a jewel on black velvet. But there was something else, something she had not seen before. Lines of light connecting the stars, a web of energy that stretched across the entire galaxy, linking every world to every other world. It pulsed with life, with possibility, with potential. "What is that?" whispered. "The future," Sarah said, "if the galaxy will accept it. We have built networks that can connect every world instantly, technologies that can heal any disease, power sources that can end scarcity forever, knowledge that can answer questions your scientists have not even thought to ask. We want to share all of it. We want to help the galaxy become something greater than it has ever been. We want to see what happens when all the species of the cosmos work together instead of against each other." She turned to face. "That is why we came back, Ambassador, not for revenge, not for conquest, for this. For hope." Stared at the web of light connecting the stars. She thought about her world, her people, the 3,000 years of peace built on lies, the fear that still gripped the galaxy. And she thought about what the future could be, if that fear could be replaced with trust. "I will try," she said finally. "I will tell them what I have seen, what you have told me. I cannot promise they will believe me. I cannot promise anything will change. But I will try." Sarah's smile was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "That is all we ask, Ambassador. That is all we have ever asked. Just give us a chance. Give us the opportunity to prove that we have changed, and we will show you something wonderful." Looked one last time at the galaxy spread out before her, at the web of light that connected the stars, at the future that was waiting if only the galaxy could find the courage to accept it. Then she turned and walked back toward her shuttle. She had work to do. The hardest work of her life. But for the first time since the human ships had appeared, she was not afraid. She was hopeful. 1,000 years had passed since the humans returned. Ambassador of the sat in a garden on a world that had not existed a century ago. The planet had been built by humans and working together. Its mountains were shaped by human technology. Its oceans were filled by water singers. Its forests grew from seeds donated by a dozen different species. It was called New Dawn, and it was the most beautiful place in the galaxy. Was old now, very old, even with human medicine extending her life far beyond what should have been possible. She could feel the weight of centuries pressing down on her, but her mind was still sharp, and her memories were still clear. She remembered the day she had returned from the human ship. She remembered standing before the council and telling them what she had learned. She remembered their disbelief, their fear, their anger. She remembered High Counselor rising from his seat, his ancient face twisted with rage. "You have been deceived," he had shouted. "The humans are playing a game with us. They are lulling us into false security before they strike." "They have changed," had replied. "I have seen it, I have felt it. They are not our enemies anymore. Humans do not change. They are killers, monsters. They nearly destroyed the galaxy once. They will do it again if we give them the chance." The argument had gone on for days, weeks, months. Some species wanted to accept the human offer of friendship. Others wanted to reject it completely. A few wanted to attack while they still had the chance. In the end, the council had decided to do nothing. They would not accept human help. They would not attack human ships. They would simply wait and see what happened. And so the long integration began. It was not fast. It was not easy. Many species refused to have anything to do with humanity. They remembered the old stories too well. They saw human ships in their skis and felt only terror. Some worlds built massive defenses, preparing for an attack that never came. Others closed their borders entirely and refused all contact with the outside universe. But some worlds took a different path. They were among the first to accept human help. They had always been curious. They had always asked questions, and the humans, it turned out, had answers. Human doctors came to worlds and cured diseases that had plagued the population for centuries. Human engineers shared technologies that transformed agriculture, manufacturing, transportation. Human teachers opened schools where young could learn things their ancestors had never dreamed of. And slowly the fear began to fade. remembered the first time she had seen a human child playing with a child. They had been in a park on Prime just a few years after the return. The human girl was teaching the boy a game that involved throwing a ball back and forth. They were laughing. They were happy. They did not know that their species had once been enemies. They did not care. She had stood there watching them for a long time, and she had felt something shift inside her. Something hard and cold that had been there so long she had forgotten it existed. Hope, that was what it was. Hope for a future she had never believed was possible. As the centuries passed, more species followed the example. The whose admiral had once tried to start a war with the humans. One by one they opened their borders. One by one they accepted human friendship. And one by one they discovered that the humans had not lied. Human technology was freely shared with anyone who wanted it. There were no conditions, no demands, no hidden costs. The humans gave away power sources that could end energy scarcity forever. They shared medical knowledge that extended by centuries. They offered transportation networks that connected the galaxy in ways that had never been possible before. And they asked for nothing in return except one thing. "Tell your children the truth," the human ambassador had said all those centuries ago. "Tell them what your ancestors did, tell them why, and tell them that we forgave you. Let the next generation begin without the old lies." It had been hard, harder than had expected. Many species did not want to admit what they had done. They did not want to tell their children that their civilization had been built on the imprisonment of an innocent species. They did not want to face the shame of their ancestors' actions. But the humans were patient. They had learned patience in their long imprisonment. They waited for the truth to spread at its own pace. They helped those who asked for help. They left in peace those who did not. And slowly, over centuries, the galaxy began to heal. The old lies were replaced with new truths. The old fears were replaced with new friendships. The old hatreds were replaced with something the galaxy had never known before. Trust watched as a group of children ran past her bench in the garden. They were from half a dozen different species. Human. Others she did not even recognize. They were playing some kind of game, laughing and shouting in a mix of languages that blended together into something beautiful. This was the future. This was what the humans had dreamed of when they were locked away in their prison. This was why they had waited 3,000 years instead of taking revenge. A young human woman sat down on the bench beside. She had dark skin and bright eyes, and she moved with the easy grace that humans had developed over their centuries of transformation. "You look thoughtful, Ambassador," the young woman said. Smiled. "I was remembering old memories, old fears, old hopes." "Good memories." "Some of them." Watched the children playing. "I remember when humans were the most feared species in the galaxy. I remember when your ships filled our skis and everyone expected to die." The young woman nodded. "I have studied that time. It must have been terrifying." "It was, but also," paused, searching for the right words, "also wonderful in a strange way, because everything changed after that. Everything became possible." She turned to look at the young woman. "I have spent my life studying your people, 1,000 years trying to understand what you are, and I think I finally do." The young woman tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "My ancestors were right to fear your kind," said slowly, "but they were afraid of the wrong thing. They feared your capacity for war, your violence, your endless aggression. And yes, those things were terrifying, but they were not what made you truly dangerous. What made you dangerous was your patience." The young woman was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. It was the same smile that had seen on Sarah's face 1,000 years ago. The same smile that had appeared on the first human ships when they emerged from behind the veil. "Patience is something we learned the hard way," the young woman said. "We had to. There was no other choice." "No," agreed. "There was not, but you made something beautiful out of it. You turned your prison into a classroom. You turned your rage into wisdom. You turned your hate into love. And when you finally came back, you did not come with weapons. You came with answers. She reached out and took the young woman's hand. Human skin was warm, soft, so different from the scales of a, but also in some ways the same. 3,000 years you waited, said. 3,000 years you grew. And when you emerged, you became exactly what the galaxy needed. Not conquerors, not destroyers, but teachers, healers, friends. That is the most terrifying thing of all, you know. Not your power, not your technology, the fact that you chose to use them for good. The young woman squeezed her hand gently. We had a lot of time to think about what we wanted to be, and we decided that the best revenge is not destruction. It is becoming so much more that the ones who wronged you cannot help but need you. Laughed softly. Sarah said something very similar to me 1,000 years ago. She was my ancestor, many generations back. I have her journals. The young woman's smile became tender. She wrote about you, you know. She said you were the bravest person she ever met, the first person who looked at humanity and saw what we could be instead of what we had been. Felt tears forming in her eyes. Strange. She had not cried in centuries. I was just asking questions, she said. I was always asking questions. And those questions changed everything. Without you, the integration might have taken twice as long. You were the bridge ambassador, the first person to stand between two worlds and say that peace was possible. Above them, the sky was turning gold and pink with the sunset. The children had stopped their game and were sitting in a circle, listening to one of the older human children tell a story. Could hear fragments of it. Something about a young species that was locked away for a long time and learned to become something wonderful. The story of humanity, the true story, the one that children of all species now learned. I am old, said quietly. I have lived longer than any should, and I have seen things that my ancestors never dreamed of, but I think this moment right here is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. She gestured at the garden, at the children, at the sky full of stars where human and alien ships moved together in peace. This is what you gave us. This is what you came back for, not revenge, not conquest, this. A new dawn, the young woman said. Yes, smiled through her tears. A new dawn after all that darkness, after all that fear, a new dawn. The young woman stood up and offered her hand. Would you like to walk with me, Ambassador? There is going to be a celebration tonight. 1,000 years since the return. I think you should be there. Took her hand and let herself be helped to her feet. Her body was old, but her heart was full. I would like that, she said. I would like that very much. They walked together through the garden, past the playing children, past the flowering trees, past the fountains that danced with water from a dozen different worlds. Above them the stars came out one by one, and somewhere among those stars knew there were human ships, millions of them, spread across the entire galaxy, building, healing, teaching, helping. Still patient, still kind, still smiling. 3,000 years ago, the galaxy had locked away a species they feared would destroy them. They had erased humanity from history and tried to forget they existed. But humans do not stay forgotten. Humans do not stay caged. Humans find a way forward no matter how long it takes. And when they finally emerged, they did not bring destruction. They brought something far more powerful. They brought hope. The celebration that night was the largest in galactic history. Billions of beings from thousands of species gathered to remember and to look forward. There were songs in every language, dances from every culture, food from every world. And at the center of it all, there was a monument. It had been built a century ago, on the 100th anniversary of the return. It showed a human hand and an alien hand, reaching toward each other across a gap that had once seemed impossible to cross. Beneath the monument there was an inscription, just 4 words, simple words, but they meant everything. We chose forgiveness. Stood before the monument as the celebration swirled around her. The young human woman stood beside her, along with representatives from every species in the galaxy. They had all come to honor the past and celebrate the future. And as looked up at those two hands reaching for each other, she finally understood something she had spent 1,000 years trying to grasp. The humans had not won by being stronger. They had not won by being smarter. They had not won by being more patient, although they were certainly patient. They had won by refusing to let the galaxy define what they were. For 3,000 years, the universe had called them monsters. For 3,000 years, everyone had expected them to prove that label right. But humans had looked at that expectation and said no. They had decided to become something else, something better, something the galaxy desperately needed but had never known to ask for. They had become the answer to a question no one had dared to ask, the bridge across a chasm no one had believed could be crossed, the proof that even the deepest wounds could heal, given enough time and enough love. And now, 1,000 years after they returned, the galaxy was transformed, not because humans had conquered it, but because humans had shown it what was possible. Felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see the young human woman smiling at her. "Thank you," the young woman said, "for everything, for believing in us when no one else would." Shook her head. "I did not believe in you, I just asked questions. You did all the rest." But asking questions is how everything starts. The young woman's smile widened. It is how we found our way out of hate. It is how the galaxy found its way to trust. It is how everything beautiful begins. She looked up at the monument, with someone brave enough to ask, what if things could be different? Followed her gaze, the two hands reaching for each other, human and alien, past and future, fear and hope. What if things could be different? She repeated softly. And above them, the stars shone down on a galaxy that had finally learned the answer. Things could always be different. All it took was patience, and courage, and the willingness to forgive. The humans had shown them that. The humans, who had once been the most feared species in the universe, had given the galaxy its greatest gift. Not technology, not power, not even knowledge. Just the simple truth that hatred is not forever, that wounds can heal, that enemies can become friends. That even after 3,000 years of darkness, a new dawn can rise. And it had risen. It was rising still, and it would keep rising forever as long as there were beings brave enough to reach across the gap and take each other's hands. The celebration went on long into the night, stayed until she was too tired to stand, then let the young human woman help her to a quiet place where she could rest. As she drifted off to sleep, she heard the sounds of the celebration in the distance, laughter, music, joy. The sounds of a galaxy at peace. And somewhere she knew the humans were smiling. They had been right all along. The best revenge was not destruction. The best revenge was becoming so much more that the ones who wronged you could not help but love you. And the galaxy did love them, after everything, despite everything. Because of everything. Closed her eyes and smiled. It was a good universe, better than she had ever dared to dream. And it was only the beginning.